Hello, my name is Lisa, and I work for Pacific Science Center at the Mercer Slough Environmental Education Center in Bellevue. Here at Pacific Science Center, we're pretty big fans of pollinators. You can visit butterflies in the tropical magical space of our butterfly house, check out our pollinator garden, where native plants and local pollinators work together, or visit us out at Mercer Slough, where you can walk the trails and see hummingbirds and native bees in their natural environment. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about native bees. Wild bees have about 4,000 different species throughout North America, and they're kind of the unsung heroes of pollination. Many of you are probably familiar with the honeybee, which is native to Eurasia, and which humans have transported to 4 different continents as we spread agriculture over time. But honeybees aren't quite as efficient pollinators as some of our native bees are, like this bumblebee on the lupin in front of me. So in this video, I'll show you some ways that scientists catch bumblebees for study either in the field or to bring back into their labs. We'll take a little bit of a look at bumblebee anatomy. We'll talk about buzz pollination and sonication and some special ways that bumblebees are able to pollinate plants in ways that honeybees can't. And we'll also talk about ways that you can help bumblebees even if you don't have a backyard of your own. So out in the field, scientists, as you're probably not surprised, use a net to catch bumblebees. And here we have this beautiful blue lupin. Bumblebees and humans, we actually have a vision range that overlap. So humans can see anything from red into the violet spectrum. Bumblebees, on the other hand, they see more. They can kind of get a bit of a yellow-orange, but then they can't see red, but they see into the ultraviolet range. And so flowers like this blue lupin are really attractive to bumblebees. They particularly like blue flowers. Okay, so there's a bee inside. You can hear it. Not terribly happy, understandably. I'm gonna pull the vial out of my pocket and pop off the lid. And this is the slightly tricky part, getting the bee into the vial without the bee flying away. Obviously, this isn't something you'd probably want to do at home. Not a good idea. But I will say that bumblebees are a pretty non-aggressive bee. They're really pretty gentle. I've never been stung doing this. Oh, it's hiding in a tiny piece of leaf. Okay, friend. Oops. So I'm gonna try and slip it into the vial. You can hear it maybe through my mic. And now I'm just going to carefully, keeping the netting over the top of the vial so it doesn't get out. Then grab the cap, bring the cap up through the net, and slowly over the top. And there's the bee. Some of the pollen is coming off on the inside of the vial. But what I'll do now is I'll slip the bee into a cooler that's nice and cold, and it's going to cool down the bee's body. The bee's kind of going to go into a torpor state, and it's going to make it easier for us to examine the bee. It'll almost go into kind of like a hibernation. So this is a yellow-faced bumblebee that's been sitting in my cooler for a few minutes, and its body processes have slowed way down. It stopped moving, and so I'm going to gently slip it out onto this piece of paper, and we'll have a chance to look at some of the bee's anatomy as it warms up. So like all other insects, bees have 3 body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And some other kind of cool features of this bumblebee are it's obviously very fuzzy. I like to think of them as kind of like little flying teddy bears. And all of that fur on the bumblebee is helpful as it moves from plant to plant. It collects pollen on its fur, and then it combs it all back into the pollen basket on her back leg, also called a corbicula, if you want to use the technical scientific term for it. She takes a little bit of nectar to make it all sticky and mixes it with the pollen so that it will stick to this flat spot, the corbicula on her back leg. But some things you can tell about her. One way to tell the difference between a bee and, say, a fly is that bees have these long antennae that tend to have a little kink in them. Flies have very short, stubby antennae. Bees have eyes on the sides of their head. Flies tend to have eyes that are on the top of their head that almost touch. And then flies also tend to be a lot less hairy than bees. They do have hair, but bumblebees tend to be nice and fuzzy. Flies also have 2 pairs of wings, and if I'm really gentle, try and move it out a little bit. Bees, wasps, they all have 4 wings, whereas a fly has 2. And so the head on a bumblebee is all about sensory experiences. Those antennae have segments, and each segment has a different little function, maybe sensing different pheromones, that type of thing. You can see the bumblebee's eyes. Once again, bumblebees can see into the ultraviolet range. They can also see polarized light, and polarized light is how they navigate from flower to flower and then return back to their nest. And so the head is all about sensory organs. The thorax, the middle part of the bee, and I'm going to gently flip her over. The thorax is all about locomotion. So the thorax is both where her wings are attached to her body and where all her legs are attached to her body. And then the abdomen is where reproductive organs are and where some of these pollen, trapping pollen and that type of thing on the hairs on her body as well. So she's going to slowly warm up. And as she warms up, one of the cool things that bumblebees can do is regulate their body temperature. So bees can actually kind of almost dislodge their wings from their flight muscles. And so as she starts to warm up, she can vibrate her body to start warming it. And that's a really important adaptation that bees have, bumblebees in particular have. Because they're able to warm their body through vibrating that internal vibration, they can come out earlier in spring than, say, a honeybee can, because they can warm themselves. Honeybees aren't able to warm themselves in that same way. The other cool thing about bumblebees, is that they are able to pollinate flowers like this tomato flower. Now, tomato flowers don't have any nectar, so that might be a reason honeybees don't want to visit them necessarily, but they do have pollen. And a cool thing that a bumblebee can do is called sonication. So when a bumblebee comes to a tomato flower, it will vibrate its body, and it's kind of cool. It vibrates its body in the key of middle C. And that vibration will cause the pollen in the flower to loosen. And so a bumblebee is able to pollinate flowers in the nightshade family, like tomatoes or eggplants. And honeybees aren't able to do that. So bumblebees are actually really important to pollinating certain crops that honeybees simply aren't able to do so. Ooh. You can see it vibrating, trying to warm itself up. So this is a different species of bee. If you look closely, you can notice this bee has a lot more black on its abdomen. It's got a yellow face. This one has a yellow face, but it's got an orange little rump, a lot more yellow all over its body. And once again, you can see those long, long antennae so that are different from flies. You can tell the difference between bees and wasps because wasps don't typically have all this fur at all. They might have some hair, it's kind of spiky, but wasps tend to have much smoother, kind of harder looking exoskeletons than a fuzzy bee. And you can see how a bumblebee in particular, their bodies tend to be more rounded, kind of more ovoid in shape, whereas a wasp has a really narrow waist. So that's one way to tell the difference. So if you're wondering what are some ways that you can help out pollinators, like this yellow-faced bumblebee, if you have a backyard, planting bee-friendly plants, a variety of them, and plants that bloom throughout the spring and into fall, that's a wonderful way to help bees. If you don't have a yard, you can still help bees by making sure to try and buy organic when you can and avoid pesticides. Or another way you can participate in taking care of bees is by participating in a community science project. Sometimes those are known as citizen science projects, and of course you don't need to be a citizen to participate. But some cool citizen science projects or community science projects with bumblebees are Bumblebee Watch or the Great Sunflower Project. Or if you want to learn more about bumblebees, our native bees, and their conservation, visit xerxes.org and learn all about our native pollinators and the wonderful things they do for us and the environment that we live in. So thanks for watching and be curious.